The shooting range. In this episode, Pages of History, the most produced British tank. Round Study. HE, HE, and HE? And Metal Beasts, the RB Flying Desk. We're often asked, how do I learn my way around Air RB faster? Well, a major part of it is learning some tactics, studying enemy vehicles, improving your shooting and dodging skills, but it's also important to find a plane that makes the learning process easier, and the American P400 is a great option. This machine's power plant is a 12-cylinder piston engine installed behind the cockpit. Self-sealing fuel tanks occupy the space between the spars. Bulletproof glass and steel armor plates increase survivability. For fixed armament, it has a 20mm cannon, 2 larger caliber, and 4 smaller caliber machine guns. There's also a single 500-pound bomb as an option. How do we start a battle on it? With gaining altitude, of course. The optimal speed for climbing on the P400 is around 240 km per hour. The climb rate is far from extraordinary, so it makes sense to turn aside because you need more time. The battle itself is pretty straightforward, though. Just try to avoid long dogfights, especially against multiple enemies. Energy tactics are way more efficient, but if you're being sucked into a dogfight, well, you can join it for a while. But let's get back to where you see your first enemy. Here's when you want to go lower and speed up. Choose your target carefully. The higher they fly, the more dangerous and therefore prioritized they are. Lone planes are especially vulnerable. Once you've decided on your target, commence the attack. Your weaponry is found both in the nose and in the wings, which makes shooting way more comfortable. Just keep your target in the middle of the tracer spray. This way, the MG volleys are highly likely to hit the control surfaces, while the cannon might hit the engine, the cockpit, or the tail. When you get used to the bullet's velocities, you can switch to stealth belts to make it harder for the enemy to dodge. By the way, check the ammo pool. It's pretty scarce for the cannon, only 60 rounds, barely enough for a couple of frags, which is a lesson that teaches you to use your ammo sparingly and send shorter volleys. And when you spend them all, you still have more than enough rounds for your machine guns. Once you feel comfortable in air battles, you can try your hand at assault. There's only one bomb that makes it all the more precious. When you know you aren't getting a second attempt, it increases your accuracy almost in a magical way. The British are widely believed to be much better at infantry tanks than cruiser tanks, but the truth is, complicated. Back in the mid-1930s, the Army commissioned 2 types of infantry tanks, the Mark I, with good armor, 2 seats and a machine gun, and the Mark II, with a cannon. The first machine was so bad its production was quickly discontinued, and the Germans didn't even use the ones they captured for crew training. The second machine was much more complicated and therefore expensive. By the time World War II started, its production was at an early stage, while the famous Churchill was still a draft. Enter the Valentine, an unexpected tank that the Army never explicitly ordered. But it wasn't an accident either. Let's rewind a few years. When Vickers head engineer Leslie Little went through the commission task for the Mark II, he didn't like the idea. He initiated the development of the Valentine in 1937 and presented the plan to the War Office the following year. The War Office countered with a few major changes. Increase its armor to 75mm, increase the turret crew to 3, replace the machine gun with a 2-pounder. Leslie Little agreed with the last proposition, but refused all the others. He wanted this tank to be cheap and light, while the Army, with its inadequate appetites, could make the whole project impossible. Still, the argument ended the expected way. The project was denied. However, the very next year the tables were turned. World War II was at the door, and the Army changed its mind. The Valentine was given the green light at once. Compared to existing models with the same gun, it had weaker armor, but it was much more mobile, cheaper, and lighter. The Valentines saw their first real combat in northern Africa. Thanks to their mobility, they managed to partially substitute for cruiser tanks that the front lines so badly needed. Later, they learned that the desert combat needed even more speed, while the improved armor showed little use against the German flak cannons anyway. Where the Valentines showed their true worth was the Soviet Union. They were much better at supporting infantry than the T-70 or the M3 Stuart, since they had a similar level of off-road performance and better armor. Thanks to the Soviet Union purchases, the Valentine production went on all the way to 1944. And that's the curious story of how this machine became the most produced British tank, with more than 8,000 made. In today's round study, the main character is a rather unique vehicle, the Type 75 SPH. What's unique about this tank destroyer is not its specs, but its ammo pool. 3 different types of HE rounds. So, which shell do you choose? Let's take a closer look. We'll start with the very first round available, the M107. It has a low muzzle velocity of only 580 meters per second, but delivers a devastating blow of more than 9 kilograms of TNT equivalent. Let's see what happens to a lighter target first. Here's the American M36, for instance. Since it has an open top, you don't even need a direct hit to score a frag here. The blast will incapacitate the whole crew anyway. How about a medium tank then, say the T-44? Despite its thick turret and hull armor plates, penetrating this Soviet tank isn't an issue. Aim for the turret's front, and the HE will break the roof of the hull, which means the tankers are kaput. Same fate for them if you hit the commander's cupola, or send your shell under the tank's belly. Even heavier tanks can be destroyed this way, such as the King Tigers with the Henschel turret. Finally, the heaviest target we're going to take on today is the Jagdtiger. Pretty much any part of this machine can resist HE shells, except for the belly and the lower part of the compartment's front. If you do hit the vulnerable area, though, the shell will breach the roof, damaging the transmission, the driver, and the machine gunner. But the only way you can hope for full destruction is laying a shell very close to the hull's roof. Now, how is the Type 75 shell different? For starters, its muzzle velocity is much higher at 720 meters per second. It also carries much less explosives, below 7 kilograms of TNT equivalent. It fares equally well against open-top vehicles, with the only difference of needing to hit closer. The T-44 is still just as vulnerable, unlike the heavier vehicles. For the King Tiger, you'll need to aim for the lower part of the turret's front. If you want to damage the Jagdtiger with this shell, you have to be extra accurate and try to hit the roof of the hull directly for any harm at all. The last round for today is a curiosity. It's the M107 PF, where the PF stands for the proximity fuse. This fuse doesn't get triggered by enemy tanks, though. Its trigger is the ground. If there's less than 3 meters to it remaining, the fuse goes off. Anything below it and the round simply turns into a regular M107, which is another thing to keep in mind. All of these caveats mean actual combat is, oh, so tricky. To get a successful hit, you need to send the round in a way to make it fly 3 meters above the ground, right next to the enemy, which means any regular HE round is much easier to use. There is a use for the shell, although you might find it even more peculiar. Thanks to mid-air explosive capability, the M107PF is good against low-flying ATGMs. Let's sum up. The Type 75 has a good muzzle velocity, which makes it the go-to option for longer distances. The M107 is better for close combat, and its explosive mass is high enough to damage even heavier enemies. As for the proximity fuse one, well, it's mostly for fun. How about we set you a challenge to find the best use for it? And now it's time we answered some of your questions. The first question was sent by a player called Lucas. What's the difference between the Leopard 1, Leopard A1A1, and Leopard 1A5? Hi there, Lucas. There are many minor differences, but let's cover the main ones. The A1 has a 2-plane gun stabilizer and the DM23 APF SDS rounds. The A5 model has the better DM33 rounds and a thermal vision device. Nighthawk writes, what is the purpose of yellow paint in the tip of the propellers of all single-piston engine planes? Hi, Nighthawk. Yellow is easy to spot in the sky, so it was often used for identification marks, including those on the propeller tips. Another question comes from a dog. How do you use the T-92 light tank, and what are some good vehicles to use in a lineup with it? Planes plus tanks. Hi, doggy. The T-92 is great for getting to central positions early in a battle, and for flanking, of course, much like any other light tank. As for the vehicle lineup, well, basically any tank with a BR of 6.3 to 6.7 will do. And the American tech tree offers a wide choice. Same is true for planes, but we'd like to highlight the F8F1B. It's a great machine for mixed battles, and we've talked about it in the episode 239 not so long ago. David Culin asks, are autoloaders better than manual ones? Greetings, David. The autoloader reduces your crew by 1 and makes your machine more compact, both inside and outside. It comes with some flaws, however, limiting the ammo pool and the round's length. Adding a complex mechanism always reduces reliability too. The reload speed isn't as straightforward either, since it depends on the situation. That's it for today, folks. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos, and nobody wants to miss them, surely. Don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts and comments, and we really mean that, especially the ones about your use of the M107PF. And we'll see you next week.